Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today we're going to be making some blackberry jam, and I've got a bonus for you on that as I'm going to show you how to water bath can that to make that shelf stable so you can keep that for the winter when you don't have those blackberries around. So let's get started. I've got my blackberries here and I've given those a good wash. I've got 3 pounds of those, so that's 1.4 kilograms of my blackberries. I've got sugar here. I've got 4 cups of sugar, or that's 800 grams. And I've got 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, or that's 30 milliliters. And with your lemon juice, you want to use the bottled processed lemon juice. You don't want to use the fresh. We want to make sure that we keep that acidity level down low because we're going to be water bath canning. And with the fresh lemons, as good as those are, you won't be able to use those when you're canning because you can't control the acidity level of those. So with your processed lemon juice that you get in the store, that is controlled, and you know that you've got steady acidity level in that. So when you're using your lemon juice, make sure you use the bottle for that. I'm going to set the blackberries and the other ingredients to the side, and I'm going to get ready for my water bath canning process here because that's going to take a while for that water to heat up. So let me get that set up and I'll show you how to do that next. Before I go into the water bath process, I've got a saucer here. I'm going to put that into the freezer and I'll go into detail of what that's going to be used for later. So as you're getting ready and everything's set up, get you a saucer, put that into the freezer, and I'll show you what we'll do with that in just a minute. All right, I've got my water bath counter now, and I'm going to go ahead and show you that. With your water bath counter, you want to get one that's got the rack in it so that when you put your jars and things in it, they're not going to be banging around on the bottom of that and take a chance of that getting broken. So make sure you get one that's got a rack in it and just put that onto the bottom just like that. So with my jars, I've given those a really good wash. I ran those through the dishwasher. We want those to be really clean, and we're going to put those into the bottom of our canner. And I'm going to go ahead and put those evenly out. I've got 6 jars here. Might not need 6 today, but just in case, I've got those ready to go if I need the 6. All right, I've got my jars in the canner now, and I've got some water here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to eventually move this over to the stove and get this going. But to keep the jars from floating around in it, I just take some water and I fill each one of the jars up so that they're overflowing. And that way, when you put the water in it, they're not floating around on the top of it. They've got that water built into them as you're getting ready to heat that up. So I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of these jars up, and you want your water level to be 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jars. So when you're filling those over, it'll overflow into the bottom of your canner. Fill your canner up 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jars, and we'll put that on the stove. And you want to raise that temperature up to about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll put the Celsius conversion in the description box below for that. So 180 degrees Fahrenheit, just kind of keep that level where that is, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get started with our next process with our fruit. All right, I've got my canner on the stove now. I've got the water in it and the jars are heating up and that. You want to get that started about the same time you're getting ready to start working on your berries so they'll all come together at the same time. So I've given my berries here a good wash, and there's a different number of ways that you can do this. We want to break these down, and I've got a potato masher here that we can do that depending on how smooth you want your jam to be. You can break them down a little bit more or less. You can use a food processor. If you use that, you just might want to give it a few pulses to break those up, because if you just pulse it together, you might have more of a gooey mess than you really want. So definitely, if you like it on the chunkier side, then don't mash them up as much, but if you like it more on the smooth, then do that. So I'm going to take this potato masher and just give these a little smash here and break these up a little bit. All right, I've given my blackberries a rough mash here. I don't want to break them down too much because I like mine on the chunkier side. And as you cook these, they'll continue to break down on that as well. So keep that in mind as you're breaking those down. If you want them a little bit thicker, then don't break them all up as much. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of show what that looks like. You can see that I've got some good chunks in those, but like I said earlier, they'll break down and continue to get a little bit more on the smoother side. So now we want to add our sugar, and we're going to go ahead and put that in now. And we're going to add our lemon juice. And I'm just going to give that a good mix around. Now that I've got those 3 ingredients combined, I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm going to get my Dutch oven over here. You want to make sure that when you're using your pan to cook your berries and things in, that you want something that's not going to be reactive to it, because this is an acidic base where we're going to be cooking these too, so we can water bath can these. So you want something that's got an enamel lining in it, or you want something that's stainless steel. If you use something that's aluminum, it might have a reaction with the acidity of the jam here, and it might have an off-putting taste in your jam, and you definitely don't want that. So use something that's either stainless steel or you've got an enamel lining in it when we're getting ready to cook our berries. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer the berries now to this Dutch oven. I've got my blackberries in my Dutch oven now, and I'm going to meet you at the stove and we'll continue making this jam. All right, now I've got a thermometer here, and we're going to go ahead and put this on the side of my Dutch oven here. Once you get your thermometer there, you want to make sure you get the end of that down into the berries so you get an accurate reading on that temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on high, and we're going to bring this up to a boil. And once we get it up to a boil, then we're going to turn it down, and I'll show you what we're going to do at that point. But the reason for the thermometer, we want that to be up to 220 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'll put the Celsius conversion down in the description box as well. Again, that's 220 degrees Fahrenheit, and that'll be a good indication that our berries have gel for our jam. So I'm going to go ahead and start this process cooking, bring it up to a boil, and then we'll talk about more of what we're going to do next. While this is heating up now, you want to make sure that you're stirring this. You don't want to go off and leave this because it could stick to the bottom, or it could scorch if it got too hot there and wasn't stirred around. So definitely as this is cooking and coming up to temperature, make sure that you're stirring this so that it doesn't stick and it doesn't scorch in the bottom of your pan. And this will need to cook, if you don't have a thermometer, it'll need to cook about 25 to 30 minutes, and that's kind of a rough time frame there when they think that will gel up. And we'll definitely, if you don't have a thermometer, I'll show you what you can do with that plate that we put into the freezer. That way you can test to see if your blackberries have already gelled up. While this is heating up to that temperature, it's releasing that pectin out of there, and that's what's going to make your jam, is that pectin that's going to come out of those berries. All right, this has been cooking for about 5 minutes now, and you can see it's starting to foam now. You definitely want to keep a watch on this. You don't want that to boil over, so by stirring on that, if you need to turn it down just a little bit till it gets up to boiling, definitely do that. You don't want that to boil over the side of the pan. It'll stop in just a minute. All right, mine has just come up to a boil. I'm going to turn the heat down to about a medium, and we're going to continue to cook this. Again, we'll cook this for a total about 25 to 30 minutes, and we want that temperature if you got one of these thermometers to 220 degrees Fahrenheit, and that'll be a good indication that your blackberries have gelled up on you. So keep a watch on this. You can see how that foam is coming up. You definitely don't want that to boil over. Just keep stirring on that and it'll go down. All right, my jam has come up to temperature. I wanted to show you what this looks like now. And I'm going to go grab that saucer, and I'm going to turn this down, and I'm going to show you, if you don't have a thermometer, what that saucer is for. So I'm going to turn this down. I'll be right back. As I've got my saucer, I'm just going to grab a spoon of my jam here, and I'm going to put that on the plate, and I'm going to let that sit and cool down, and then that should, in a couple of minutes, I'll be able to let you see what that looks like. All right, I'm back, and I've got my saucer here, and the way you can tell after this is cooled down, just leave it out for a couple of minutes so you can put it in the refrigerator and let it cool down for a few minutes, and that way you can run your finger through it, and if it doesn't go back together, you know that it's gelled up, and I can tell by looking at that that's really gelled up on me. So that's what you want it to be. If you don't have a thermometer, this is what the plate's for. You can test it to see if your blackberries have gelled up. So now let's get started with that water bath canning process, and we'll get all the equipment out here, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. I've got a saucepan here, and I've got my lids, and I'm just going to put those into this water and put those on the stove and just kind of bring those up just a little bit above room temperature. You don't really have to have those boiling. That's not recommended anymore. I remember when I was a kid, my mom, the way that it was back then is we had to bring these to a boil. So I'm going to bring these up just a little bit above room temperature. We are ready to start filling our jars now, and at this point we want to make sure that everything is really clean. Our utensils we're going to be using for those. So I've got a funnel here that we'll be using to funnel the jam into the jars. I've got a nice scoop here that's got a nice handle on it, really deep, that you can get a lot into that. And this is a dual purpose tool that I've got here. This measures headspace, and with the jam that we're making today, you need a 1/4 inch headspace between where the top of the food is to where the top of the jar is. And each one of these little markings on the side here is a 1/4 inch. So if you get 1/4, half, 3/4, and up to an inch, that's what this is for. And the other side is a debubbler. And we want to make sure we get all the bubbles out of our jam, because once that starts processing, if there's any bubbles in there and that comes to the top, then you won't have that 1/4 inch headspace. You'll have just a little bit less. So definitely you want to debubble your jars before you put the lid on them. And then I've got my rings. You don't have to do anything with those. You want to make sure those are in really good condition. There's not any rust on those. You can reuse these over and over and over again. And I've got my lids here that I heated up just a little bit. And I've got a tool here that I'll be using to pull the lids out with that, so you don't have to touch those, so those stay nice and clean. All right, so I'm gonna go get one of my jars and we'll start filling it up. And I've got a jar holder here. You definitely want to make sure that you get something like that that's got good grippers on the side of it. You don't want to use tongs because tongs, it could slip and break. You don't want to burn yourself or cut yourself if you break one of your jars if it slips out of the tong. So definitely use something that's made for canning. This is really nice. It's got little rubber grippers on that. I'll put the link in the description box below for that so you can see what that looks like. I wanted to show you this other funnel that I've got here. This other funnel also measures headspace also. So if you don't have one of these, you can buy this and it'll serve both purposes. You can look on the side and see the air increments on the side of it, quarter, half, 3/4 up to an inch on that. And it goes in millimeters also. So definitely it's dual purpose for that reason also. All right, so I've got my first jar filled up here, and we want to make sure that we take our debubbler and we're going to run that down the side just to make sure we don't have any air pockets in the bottom. And like I said, you can use the other side of it to measure to see if you've got your 1/4 inch that you've got there. So I'm going to put just a little bit more in there to make sure that I get that 1/4 inch headspace. All right, I've got my first jar filled now, and I've got just a little bit of white distilled vinegar here and a paper towel. And I'm just going to run that around the top to make sure that we don't have any of that sticky jam on the top, because we want to make sure that that lid seals onto that really tight on that. We don't want any air leaks on that. So this is another way also to tell if you've got any cracks and things on the top of your jar. So give it a wipe off there to make sure that that's nice and clean. Then we'll grab one of our lids that we've got here. We'll put that on just like that. We'll grab one of our rings. And then I've got a pot holder here. I'm going to take that and I'm going to hold the side of the jar because that is really, really hot. And you want this fingertip tight on that. So you just want to grab it with your fingers and just give it a twist until it stops moving. That's fingertip tight. You don't want to wrench it down there and make it really tight. You want to make sure that that air comes out of there as we water bath can those so that that will get a nice seal. So fingertip tight, and that will be set to go back into the canner. So we've got our lifting tool here. I'm going to put that back in the water. I'm going to go grab another one and we'll do another one. The reason that I heated these jars up when we were started is we don't want to put hot jam into cold jars because that could crack the jars. So you definitely want to make sure your jars are warm because you're putting warm jam into it, and that'll take that less chance of that of breaking. So definitely that's why you're heating up your jars at the beginning. I've got my jar filled now. We're going to take our debulber and run it in there to make sure that we don't have any air pockets down into the bottom. Take it and measure to see if you've got your 1/4 inch, which I do. All right, now that we've got that debubble, we'll take a little bit of that vinegar and we're going to run it around on the top again just to make sure we get anything off of that that might be on there. Check again to make sure you don't have any cracks on your jars. Take your tool, get your lid. Take your ring, fingertip tight. I'm going to put this back in the canner and I'll let you know how many we get out of it. All right, I've got my last jar here. These are half-pint jars, and I did get 6 jars today. So yours could be more or less depending on how long it takes for yours to gel up. But like I said, I got 6 jars. I'm going to go ahead and put this into my canner and I'll come back and talk to you about the time. All right, I got my 6 jar now in my canner, and I do have that up on high now. I want to bring that up to a rolling boil. Not just a boil, I want it rolling boil. And then we're going to put the lid on it. And once the lid goes on it and you get that rolling boil, you want to water bath can those for 10 minutes. And that 10-minute time is for altitudes that are below 1,000 feet. Where I'm at, I'm below 1,000 feet. I'll put the link in the description box below of the different altitudes above the 1,000 that you'll need to add the time for. So definitely check that out. If you're in an area where there's higher terrain, you'll have to process yours a little bit longer. But where I'm at, below 1,000 feet, it's 10 minutes. We want to make sure that water comes up to a rolling boil. We'll put the lid on it, and then we'll start the clock for 10 minutes, and I'll see you back when these are done. All right, I am back, and my timers have gone off now, my 10-minute timer. Oh, did you hear that noise? That indicated that the jar just sealed. When you hear those little pings like that, that tells you that it's a good indication that the jar is sealed. So I'm going to go ahead and take all of my jars out of the water and put them on this rack so they can cool down. I'll be right back. Now, when you're bringing your jars out of your canner, you just want to hold them straight up and down. You don't want to turn them. Oh, there, that one started sealing there on that one. So you definitely want to make sure that you're holding them straight up and down. Don't worry about taking the water off the top of them because they're really hot. And what that's going to do is that will just evaporate right off there. So we're going to let these cool down now. Well, another one just sealed. That's really nice to hear that. Now, once you pull these out, you want to make sure that you put these somewhere where somebody's not going to get hurt by touching these, because these are really, really hot. So definitely put these somewhere so they can cool down. So there could be a lot of variables with how many jars you get out of your canning today. If you had to let it cook a little bit longer to get it to gel up, then you definitely might not get 6 that I got out of here, or you could get just a little bit more if you didn't have to let it cook as long. So it's all kind of variables what you're going to get. I got 6 out of mine today. All right, now that we've got our jars here on this rack cooling down, I'm going to let these sit here overnight, and then at that point I'll be able to come in and take the rings off of them, and that way you'll be able to tell and test to see if the lid itself is attached to the jar. Just pick it up, and if it's stuck to it, you'll know that it is sealed and you've got a good seal. There's also a little dimple here on the top of it. If you see that indented on the top, that's what that little noise was, is it was pulling that dimple on the top of that lid down into the jar. That's another indication that you've got a good seal on those. And you want to store your jars on the can shelf with the rings off. You definitely don't want to put the jars on the shelf with the rings on, because if for some reason the lid come loose and there was just enough pressure of that ring that could push it back down on the top of that lid, and then you get a false seal on that, and you could get some bacteria and things in there that you don't want in your jam, and you definitely don't want to eat those. So definitely store your jams on the can shelf with the rings off. If for some reason, once you pull the ring off and one of your lids is not stuck down, that is not one that you want to throw away. At that point, you can put it in the refrigerator, put the ring on, and that one you can eat right then. It's still good to eat. It just didn't seal for your shelf. So don't put anything on the shelf that there's a lid that's not sealed down to the jar. But if you get one that's not sealed, then definitely put that one in the refrigerator, eat on that one, and it is good to go. If you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, check out one of these other 2 videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you how your Blackberry jam turned out. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.